What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 13. Sleeper picks.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you some of my top DFS sleeper picks, super low priced and low ownership players that could crush value this week and give your lineup an advantage over the field. These are risky plays meant for large tournaments only. Don't go all in on any of these guys. They are high risk, high reward picks. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NFL Week 13, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Mike White from the New York Jets, playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the fifth most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Mike White scored 28 fantasy points last game. He got 3 rush attempts. He's going to be about 5% owned, projected at 17 fantasy points here in Week 13. He's $5,400 DraftKings salary, $1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Jets trailing by 3. So Mike White, he came into action last game, scored 28 fantasy points. Now he's got a fantastic matchup, and I think this is a good game script for Mike White. Should be a somewhat high-scoring game. I think the Jets are going to fall behind the Vikings. Vegas thinks the Jets are only going to be trailing by about 3 points, but I think that's going to be closer to a touchdown throughout the game. I think the Vikings are going to put a lot of pressure on the Jets to push the ball downfield, so I like Mike White here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Now, the other sleeper pick at the quarterback position that I like is Jimmy Garoppolo from the San Francisco 49ers, playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 10th worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Jimmy Garoppolo has averaged 17.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2.3 rush attempts per game. Only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 17.8 fantasy points here in Week 13. He's $5,700 DraftKings salary, $1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, with the 49ers favored by 4.5. Jimmy Garoppolo has scored 13, 25, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 4, 1, and 5 rush attempts. So this is a great matchup here. I've been a big fan of Jimmy Garoppolo throughout the season. Now, he scored 13, 25, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 4, 1, and 5 rush attempts in those games. I think the Dolphins are going to keep this close. So I like Jimmy Garoppolo here versus the Miami Dolphins.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So my sleeper pick at the running back position is Najee Harris from the Pittsburgh Steelers, playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Najee Harris has averaged 12.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 14.4 rush attempts per game and 3.3 pass targets per game. Only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 12.6 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks that we don't have an over-under here right now for this game, but I have a feeling this will be a somewhat high-scoring game. And Najee Harris has scored 11, 28, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 10, 20, and 20 rush attempts on top of 1, 6, and 1 pass target. So this is a good matchup. I could see him getting 20 plus touches in this game. So I like Najee Harris here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Other sleeper picks I like, Jamal Williams and Cordell Patterson. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. This is my favorite sleeper pick on the slate. I'm going to go pretty heavy with this pick. I like George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. George Pickens has averaged 10.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.4 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 79% of the snaps, going to be about 3% owned, projected at 12 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 5,100 DraftKings salary, 1,600 more on FanDuel, and George Pickens has scored 11, 18, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games off of 6, 6, and 4 pass targets. So 12 targets over the past 2 games, consistently producing over 10 fantasy points for the last 3 games, and he's got a great matchup. So I like George Pickens here versus the Atlanta Falcons.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Other sleeper picks that I like, Adam Thielen and Drake London. Okay, moving on to the tight end position, my sleeper pick is Gerald Everett from the LA Chargers playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Gerald Everett has averaged 9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.9 pass targets per game. Only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 4,400 DraftKings salary, 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, and the Chargers trailing by 2.5. So Gerald Everett scored 8 fantasy points last game off of 4 pass targets. Now he's got a great matchup here in what should be a high-scoring game and a close competitive game. I can see why he's going to go under-owned here because Pat Freiermuth, only 4,300 DraftKings salary, and Pat Freiermuth is averaging 10.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.1 pass targets per game. Going to be about 15% owned, so you can see a lot of people are gravitating towards Pat Freiermuth at that price point. And I probably would play Pat Freiermuth over Gerald Everett. But if you're looking for a sleeper pick here, I like
Gerald Everett in a good matchup in a high-scoring game here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. Oh, and keep in mind that Mike Williams is out, so I think that's going to be a little bump to Gerald Everett here. Doesn't look like a lot of people are factoring that in. Still only around 2% ownership, so I think that makes him a pretty good sleeper pick. Another guy who I think is under-owned here is George Kittle from the San Francisco 49ers playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the 10th worst defense overall. They give up the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. And George Kittle has averaged 11.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.7 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 90% of the snaps, only going to be about 5% owned, projected at 11.8 fantasy points here in week 13. He's 5,000 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 45.5 points scored in this game, with the 49ers favored by 4.5. George Kittle has scored 6, 24, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 4, 6, and 2 pass targets. Now, I know there's a lot of mouths to feed on the 49ers, but this is a fantastic matchup, and we've seen George Kittle has 20 plus fantasy point upside, so I like George Kittle here versus the Miami Dolphins.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.